All right, guys, for our next project, we're probably going to be building what is my favorite project of this entire course. And so I called this project Coinstar. I thought I was being clever with the name. However, after finishing making the project, I realized that name is already taken by that stupid coin machine. If you guys remember back in the day, that used to be at the local grocery stores where you could take all your coins and dump it into the machine, and it would give you like a little receipt that was that you could exchange for cash. But anyways, I'm sticking to that name because I think it's an awesome name for this project. So let me quickly run through. So let me quickly run through what we're going to be building for this application. And so this is basically just a cryptocurrency price tracker. And so you could see that I've got 4 coins listed here. So I've got Bitcoin, Litecoin. I don't know what these two stand for. I can't remember off the top of my head. But what we'll load or render onto the screen is we'll get an image for the coin. We'll render out what its value is at that moment, and we'll also give the percentage change. And right now, it looks like all of the prices for the coins have gone up over the past 24 hours, so everything's green, and the little arrow is indicating that it's increased. However, if the value of the coins drop, we would see that this arrow would point down and it would get color-coded red. Now, if we hover over any one of these coins, you'll see that we get a little X mark. And so if we select that, it'll delete it and we'll stop tracking the price of that coin. We've got a little drop-down menu up here. This is going to give a list of coins that we support in our application. And if we select a coin, it's going to then add it to the watch list. And obviously, if we add a coin that's already there, nothing should change. Yep, and here we go. We can see that the value of this coin has dropped by 0.14%. And you can see that it's changed to red, and we've got that down arrow. Now, at this point, if we had stopped right here, I think that would be a pretty fun application to work on. However, I wanted to make this a little more challenging. So if you click on any one of these coins, it's going to take us to a detailed page about that coin. So let's click on this, and let's see that. Now, look at that. So we're going to be using a charting library called Chart.js that's going to help render out historical data about the price of the coin, and we should also be able to flip between how far back we want to go. So right now, we default to the last 24 hours. However, if we select a year, you can see that it's going to go back to a full year's worth of data. And then if we select 7 days, you'll see that it'll go to just 1 week's worth of data. And then beneath that, we're also going to render out some more detailed information about the coin. So we got the market cap, the volume, circulation supply, low and high for the past 24 hours, and then total supply. And then lastly, one other feature I wanted to point out is that we're also going to implement local storage on your web browser. And so if I go back to this tracking page and I hit refresh, you'll see that we're always tracking the same coin. So if I add a new coin, it's going to remember that this is part of the watch list that the user is interested in. And so if I hit refresh, you'll see this new coin is automatically going to get loaded up when we refresh the screen. And if I delete all of them, and let's say I just want to watch Bitcoin, and then I hit refresh, you can see that it remembers the exact coins that we want to watch. And so we're going to implement that using the local storage feature of your web browsers. And for this project, we're going to be using the CoinGecko API. And so I found this API, and it's an awesome API because, first of all, it's free. And on top of that, you don't even need a token for authentication. So it's super easy to get started with, and they've got amazing documentation. So you'll see that implementing this API is going to be dead simple. Anyways, I think that's enough talking. Let's go ahead and get started with building out this application in the next video. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started with the base configuration for our application. So I'm going to use the Create React App tool to create the boilerplate for our application. And we're going to call this Coinstar. Now let's go ahead and delete all of our files. And I'm going to create an index.js as well as an app.js. All right, and then once we render out our app component, let's start our application. And then let's just verify that we're rendering out app. So that looks like it's working. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to set up the routing before we proceed any further. So if we go back to our web page, you'll see that we've got really just two pages, right? We've got this main page here, which once we start building out the app, I'm going to call it summary page. It's going to because it's going to give us a summary of the price of all of the coins that we're interested in. And then when we click on it, it's going to take us to the detailed page. So those are going to be two pages. It's going to be coin summary and then coin page. Oh, sorry, coin summary and then coin detail pages. So let's, well, first of all, we need to actually install React Router. So let's add a new terminal, right? And you can add a new terminal here and then hit npm install React Router DOM. That way we don't have to actually stop our application. All right, and while we're at it, we might as well install some of the other dependencies that we'll need as well. So we know that since we're going to interact with an API, we're going to need to install Axios. So we'll install that as well. Now, what I want to do is I want to create a new folder in our source directory. And this folder is going to contain all of our React Router pages. So I want to store all of our page components in a separate folder. And that's going to just organize our app a little bit more. So I'm just going to call this pages. And then within here, let's make a new file. And I'm going to call this coin detail page.jsx. And so this page is going to represent the detailed page of a coin. It's going to be a regular component as well. And then we're going to make a new page. And I'm going to call this coin summary page. And now let's go ahead and wire up our React router. So I'm going to go to our app component. And within here, let's say we want to import, first of all, we're going to want to import our pages. So we'll import coin detail page, and then we'll import that from /pages and then coin detail. And then we're going to do the same thing for coin summary. Okay, so we've got these two pages imported, and we're also going to have to import React Router DOM. So we'll do that. Whoops. And we want to specifically import browser router as well as route. And within our app component, I'm going to break out this div, remove the app, and we're going to wrap everything in our browser router. And I'm going to just render out our summary page for now. And we'll define a route for that. So we'll do route. And then I'm going to do an exact and the path. So when we go to the essentially the home page or just a slash route, we want to load up that summary page component. And then here I'm going to do the component prop and set that to coin summary page. So we've got well, we haven't technically finished all of the routing, but I want to just pause the routing for now. We're not going to set up the detailed page quite yet because we have to learn a few different concepts to actually understand how to set up the detailed page for multiple different components. So for now, we're just going to leave it like this. We'll work on setting up the coin summary page. And then once we wrap that up, we'll then take a look at how to set up the coin detail page. Let's go ahead and make our components directory like we normally do. And I'm going to make our first component, which is going to be this header. And this header is going to be on both pages. So whether it's the coin summary page or the coin detail page, it should still be there. So let's add that. So we'll call this, we'll just call it header.jsx. Makes sense. And our header is just going to return an h1 tag. Well, actually, it's going to be an h1 tag with some classes. And by the way, guys, just to give you a heads up, even though this app looks ugly as hell, there's still a lot of styling that went into this. So you're going to find that throughout this course, we're going to be adding a ton of styles to a lot of our components. So there's going to be a lot of just watching me type and then copying it. If that becomes a little tedious, though, keep in mind that, I do provide all the source code. So go to the last video of this course, the last video of this project. I'm going to provide the completed code. And so anytime if I'm typing out all of the classes and it's starting to just take too long, just pause the video, then copy the classes from the source code, and then paste it in, and then you can skip over that portion of the video. It'll hopefully speed up things. I don't want this project to take too long, and I don't want to spend too much time styling our components when the main goal of this video and this course is to teach you React. And so the classes that we want to add for this h1 tag is going to be text center. And these are Bootstrap classes, so we're going to have to import Bootstrap after this. We'll do text-warning. Then we want mt-3, and then mb-4. And this is just going to say Coinstar. And like I just said, we need to import Bootstrap, so let's get Bootstrap. All right, we've got Bootstrap imported. Let's just see if our, we didn't actually render anything out onto the screen. So let's go back to our app component and let's take a look at the final completed app. And we can see that this component, right, is going to be on both pages, right? So how do we set that up within React Router DOM? I covered this in the previous project, so hopefully you guys know the answer to that. It's pretty simple. We don't have to set a route. All we have to do is just render out the component right here under Browser Router. And so we'll do header, import that in there. And so now if I hit save, we should see our header component. Perfect. And while we're there, and now just to wrap up this video for now, the last thing I want to do is import some custom CSS. So let's do new file under the source directory. We'll call this app.css. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to zero out all the margin and padding. So I'm going to do that right there. Then I want to change the background color of the body. So that's going to make it that nice, dark, almost grayish, blackish color. For the ULs, we're just going to remove the annoying little dots on the list item. Then I've got a couple of classes here, which I'm just going to copy and paste the rest. And so here, let me just minimize this. So these are the final classes. Just go ahead and pause the video and just copy or copy it from the final code. Either way, don't spend too much time worrying about the CSS. I want to keep our main focus on JavaScript. And so now that's there, let's just do a save all. And I don't know why our app's not, we didn't import our app.css. So let's go into our app component and import that. All right, and so now we've got that nice gray background. So I think that's a good stopping point. We've got the styling in place. We've got Bootstrap added, and we've set up some of the routing. And so in the next video, we're probably going to start tackling that coin summary page, which is probably which is probably which is probably the easier page of the two, because the second page, the detailed page, that charting library is kind of a pain to work with. I actually had to spend a lot of time trying to get that to work. So we'll get started with the summary page. Hopefully you guys hopefully when you guys follow along, this one's not too difficult, because we're not doing anything new on the coin summary page. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. In the last video, we set up the styling or the CSS for our application, and we also set up the routing within our application. So we have one route at the moment, and that's going to be for the slash path. So basically the root path, and we're going to be loading up the coin summary page. So the coin summary page is going to be this page here, where it gives us the summary or the quick overview of all of the coins that we're tracking. And so in this video, I want to start tackling the coin summary page. And if we take a look at this page, I think there's probably, I'd say breaking this out into two different components is probably all we need to do. So we'll have one component for the AddCoin, as well as another component for this list of coins. So let's make those components, and let's get those rendered out onto the screen. So let's make one for the AddCoin .jsx. And this is just going to be an empty function for now. We'll come back to adding this functionality probably at the end of the video. Right now, I'm more concerned with setting up the second component, which is the coin list. And so we'll do a new file for that, and we'll call this coinlist.jsx. We'll set up the base config for that. And let's go to the coin summary page, and we'll go into this div and render out both of those components. So we'll do coin add. Wait, there. It's not auto importing. Maybe I have to do a save all. All right, let's try it now. Oh, it's add coin. So I do add coin, import that, and then we need coin list. And now let's go ahead and build out our coin list component. Okay, so in our coin list component, this is probably where a lot of the logic for our application is actually going to lie. And so this component is going to be responsible for fetching data from CoinGecko, right? So as soon as this component mounts, we want it to fetch data. Now, I'm sure you guys are already aware on how to set that up. We're going to have to use the useEffect hook if we want to ever perform a task whenever a component mounts. So we're going to have to import useEffect. So we'll do useEffect. We'll import that. And we'll say what we want to do is, because we have to make an asynchronous call to that API, we have to define a new function, right? Because we can't ever return a promise within the useEffect hook. So we actually have to define a new function, and I'll call that fetch data like we have normally done. And then remember, we have to actually call that function. And lastly, we want this component to only, we want to only fetch the data when the component mounts. So we want to pass in an empty dependency array. If we don't pass this, remember, that means we're going to fetch this data every single time the component re-renders. And at this point, I don't want to set that up. And at this point, I don't want it to do that for now. I just want to fetch the data once, and then that's it. All right, and so now we're also going to have to import Axios. And we're also going to need a place to store all of that data. So we'll do const, and I'm going to call this coin. So this is going to be the data that we receive back from the CoinGecko API. And we'll do use state. And I got to import use state first. Oh, come on, VS Code. Import it for me. There we go. And then this is just going to be a empty array at start. Now let's go ahead and explore the CoinGecko API. And you'll see that there's several different endpoints. So if you just want to get the price, we can use this endpoint right here. And by the way, I told you guys how amazing this API is. You can actually hit try it out and then specify the different values. So if I want to see, let's see, for IDs, I can pass in Bitcoin as the ID, and then the currencies that I want to receive data for, and then we can hit execute. And it's going to show you the request that it's going to send, as well as the response. And so this just gives us the price. However, this is not going to be the one that I want to use. Instead, I want to use Coin Markets. The reason we're going to use Coin Markets is that it gives us a little more data, and we need to actually retrieve the 24-hour percent change. So that's only going to be in the Coin Markets API, Coin Markets endpoint. And so the way that this is going to work is we have to pass in a string of currencies that we support or that we want to receive data for. For simplicity, I'm just going to use one currency. So we're just going to do the US dollar. Although, when we complete this project, I think a good challenge for you guys would be to actually implement having an app that supports multiple currencies. It wouldn't be too hard to implement, but for now, we're just going to stick with implementing it for the US dollars. Then we have to pass in a string of IDs. And these IDs represent the different cryptocurrencies that this API supports. And so one of those is if you want the data for Bitcoin, you just type in Bitcoin, which is the ID for Bitcoin. And then here we can hit execute and we'll see the data that we're going to get. So we're going to get all of this data returned in an array. If we add, let's say like Ethereum, we should get both. So now we get Bitcoin and then we get Ethereum. And if you don't know what the different IDs are, you can always go to, let's see, where's the endpoint that I'm looking for? Coin list. So if you hit coin list and then hit try out, it's going to give you a full list of all the coins it supports and the IDs for them. And this is a pretty massive list. So you're going to have to go through all of these to find which coins you want. And we're just going to hard code a couple that I've already found. So we can skip that. And this page usually ends up being massive. So I'm just going to refresh it so I don't have to deal with that. All right, and so let's do this one more time so I can copy what the GET request should look like. So we want USD, and then we want Bitcoin, and then let's say Ethereum. Okay, and so this is going to be our GET request, so we're going to send it to this endpoint. And then, there's going to be the question mark, and then you can see we pass in the currency, which is US dollar, and then we pass in the IDs of our Bitcoin. All right, so now that we know what our GET request is going to look like, let's set up the API. And I'm going to do this a little bit different than we've done before. Instead of just typing out the full API here, I want to create a new folder. And I'm going to call this APIs. And then within here, we'll do new file. And I'm going to call this, we'll just call this CoinGecko.js. We'll import Axios here. And I'm just going to export default. And then we're going to run the Axios.create method. And we're just going to say the base URL is going to be https://api.coingecko.com/API/v3. And this is just so that we don't have to keep typing out the base URL. We can just type in Axios.create and then type in / and then the specific endpoint that we want to access, because we will have to hit multiple different endpoints for our application. And so this is just going to make it a little bit easier to work with, and we don't have to continually type out the full URL. And so now we want to import this Axios object that we made. So let's go back into our coin list component. And we want to, first of all, we don't need Axios here anymore. Instead, we can just do import and then go to, let's see, we're going to call this, you know what, I'll just call it CoinGecko. I can't think of a better name. And then we'll import it from /APIs and then CoinGecko. And so here, what we can type is, so we want to do CoinGecko.get. And then the URL that I want to go to is coins/markets. Hopefully this made sense. I know this is a little bit different than what we did before, but all it's doing is that we create a Axios object from this with the base URL of /API/v3, right? Because that's, this is the full URL up to v3. And then what we do is we go into CoinList, and then we add in the specific endpoint we want to get to. And so let me make this a little bigger for you guys. So we go up to, can't highlight on this thing. Here we go. So the Axios object that we created has the URL up to here, and then we're just adding in /coins/markets to hit this exact endpoint. And then if we want to use like market chart, then what we would have to do is just add /market_chart, and that's going to take us to this endpoint. So we can reach different endpoints without having to type in the same URL over and over again. And what we want to do after this is we want to pass in our usual object, and it's going to be the parameter, so params. And let's take a look at what parameters we need. Let's go back to that API call we made right here. And so we need one for VS_currency. So we'll do VS_currency. And that's going to be set to USD. And then the next one's going to be IDs. And so we're going to need a list of coins that we want to receive data for. And so for now, I'm just going to type in Bitcoin. And we'll add in Ethereum for now as well. All right, so this should be everything we need to receive the data that we want. The next thing we want to do is we want to actually store the results. So we'll do const response equals this Axios object. And then obviously, since this is going to be an asynchronous call, we want to do await. And then we have to make this fetch data an asynchronous function. And then once we receive that data, let's do a console.log and then response. And we want response.data. But let's go back to our React. Oh, looks like we made an error. Let's see. And I didn't do a save all. There we go. We inspect and go to our console. Looks like the server responded with a status of 404. Okay, we must have made a mistake someplace. So let's go back to v3. Let's see if that looks okay. Okay, guys, so I found the issue. It was a really stupid mistake, but if you take a look at the error, you can see that we got a 404, but it looks like we're sending the API request to ourselves. And so what I had messed up is this should be all capitalized. So URL should be capitalized. So now I think if I save this, yep, it looks like it ran perfectly and we should get our data back. All right, and so let's take a look at our data. And so it's going to always return an array, even if we ask for only one object or one cryptocurrency. And we've got the different data about that cryptocurrency. So we've got the ID, the symbol, we've got an image, which we will need to render out as well. We've got the current price, which we'll need. And then we've got the price change percentage in the last 24 hours. So those are the three pieces of data that we need for each cryptocurrency on our summary page, right? We get the image, the price, and then the percent change. All right, so now that we got this API set up, let's take a break here. In the next video, I want to set up a context API to store the data on the list of cryptocurrencies the user is interested in watching, because that data is something we need to store, right? Because eventually, when I add a new coin and I'm watching that and I hit refresh, we should store that information someplace so that the next time we load the page, we should be able to remember that. And also, we need to be able to kind of dynamically render out a list of coins that we're interested in into this API call. Because right now I'm just hard coding Bitcoin, but we do eventually need to pass in a variable that's going to represent an array of coins we're interested in. All right, so I'll see you guys in the next video. In the last lecture, we were able to successfully make an API call to the CoinGecko API and retrieve data for a single Bitcoin. In this video, I want to work on setting up a state object that's going to represent all of the Bitcoins the user is interested in tracking. And we're going to utilize the context API for this because there's going to be several components that need to have access to this, and I think it makes sense to store it inside a context API. So as usual, we're going to go to our source directory and we're going to make a new folder. We're going to call this context. And then within there, we'll add a new file and we'll call this, I'm going to represent this state with the name WatchList because that makes sense. So we'll call this WatchList.js. Actually, I'm going to call this WatchList. Actually, I'm actually going to call this WatchList Context. So let me call this WatchList Context.js. And so as usual, the first thing that we need to do is we want to create our context object. So we'll do WatchList Context. And we'll create context. We got to make sure we import that as well. And then we have to create our WatchList context provider component. We're going to have to pass in the props. And I'm going to set up state within this component. And we're going to use that. We're going to do that using the useState hook. So we'll do const and then WatchList, which is just going to be an array of strings. And then we'll do useState. And let me import that. Okay, so we've got that imported. And so what we can do here is we can pass in an empty array. And what that would do is when the user first logs into this page, it's going to basically load up no coins. And so all he'll see is just this one button where he can then add coins in. But I think that's a bad user experience. I think if when the user first navigates to our page, I think by default, we should load up some of the more popular cryptocurrencies so that they can see how the website looks. And then afterwards, they can delete the ones they don't want and add the ones they do want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hard code some coins into our default state. So we're going to add Bitcoin because that's the most popular one. I think Ethereum is the second most popular. And then I don't know what's the third most popular. We'll just add Ripple, whatever. Okay. And then what we need to do is we'll return and then we'll grab that watch list context dot provider component. And we're going to pass down, let's see, I'm going to pass down an object that's going to have a watch list just for now. But eventually we will have to pass some other data. And why is this giving me an error? Let's see. Yeah, we got to import React as well. And then we'll render out the props or the child props. Save that. And then let's go back to our coin list. And let's use the use context hook to get that information. And so we're going to destructure the watch list property. And that's going to be set to use context. And then we got to import our context, which is, let's see, what is it called? Watch list context. All right. And just to make sure that's working, let's just do a console.log watch list. Let's see, cannot destructure property watch list of object as it is undefined. Yeah, so I realized I had gotten ahead of myself and I forgot that we actually have to wrap our entire app within our context. So we're going to have to add our component in. So we'll do watch list context provider and then grab that and then wrap that outside of the routing component, the browser router. Okay, and so now if I look at the console, we should see that we print out the default watch list. So that's going to be Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. All right, so we've got our watch list implemented. In the next video, we're going to start tackling how to render out our data. We will implement a separate component for each individual coin, and then obviously just iterate over that array using a maps method on that array, and then render out a separate coin. Now, before we move on to actually rendering out the coins, we need to actually make one minor adjustment, and that is that right now we're still hard coding Bitcoin into our IDs field in the parameters for our API call. And what we want to do is we want to render out the list of coins that we're interested in from WatchList. And so the way we need to pass this data into the IDs is that it should be a list of coins that we want separated by a comma. So if we wanted another coin, we would do Ethereum. And if we wanted Ripple, it would be like that, right? So we can't just pass in WatchList, which is an array. We have to pass a string like this. And an easy way to do that is to use the join method on an array. So if we do WatchList.join, what that's going to do is it's going to take all the elements within the WatchList array and it's going to join them into one big string. And what we can do is we can pass in how we want each item to be separated. So if I type in a comma, that means that each element within the array is going to get joined together and separated by a comma. If I added a question mark after it, then each one would be separated by a comma and a question mark. But we only want we only want a comma. And so this is all that we really should need. So if I do a console.log right after this response finishes, and we'll do response.data, hit save. Files, whoops, this shouldn't be in there. We should now see that we get data for the 3 different coins. So that's working great. In the next video, I just realized once again that before we can render out that data, I want to implement a simple loading feature that we learned in that Jiffy API. And so we're going to add that to this application. It's not going to be any different. It's the same exact logic. All we need is a simple Boolean state to track whether we're actually loading data or not. All right, guys, so we're going to implement loading functionality into our application now. And the first thing that we have to do is import or create a new state. And so we'll just call this is loading. And we're going to start out with our state being in false. Now, as soon as we go to actually fetch our data, this is when we want to change the state to is loading to true. And then after we receive that data, instead of console.logging it, we want to make sure we store that data in set coins. We'll do set, we want to change that to response.data. And then after we save our state, we need to change the set is loading to false. All right, so, between these lines of code right here, we're going to be in a loading state. And then after we've saved our state, we're going to change the loading state to false. All right, so let's hit save and let's just make sure we didn't break our application. All right, it looks like everything's working, and let's go to our React Dev Tools, and let's just make sure that in our CoinList state, we're updating our state with the retrieved data. So if we go to the state, we can see that we've got our array of data. So the 0 is going to be for Bitcoin. We've got one for Ethereum and one for Ripple. All right, so that's all we needed to do for the loading functionality. In the next video, we can finally get started on rendering out our data. All right, guys, to render out the data that we received from the CoinGecko API, I think it makes sense to create a new component called, I guess we can just call it coin. And that's going to represent an individual line or an individual coin within our summary page. So there'll be one coin here, another coin here, and then another one, and then another one. And before we do that, let me go ahead and just modify something here. So for the coin list is going to render out a list of individual coin components. And we're going to use the map method like we normally do to do that. And so I'm going to create a custom a function called render coins that's going to be handling the logic for that. And I'm going to define that function right up here. So we'll do const render coins. Now, since we've implemented the loading functionality, we need to check if it's actually loading. So we'll do if is loading. We'll just, for now, we'll just return a div. We'll just say loading. However, if it's not loading, we want to return a UL first. So we'll do UL, and that's going to have a few classes as well. And so we're going to add coin list and list dash group, and then empty dash 2. And then what we want to do is we want to iterate over our coins array, which is going to have all of our data. And we'll say coins.map. And then as we iterate over it, we're going to name each element coin. And then we're going to render out a single coin, which we haven't created yet, but we will in a bit. And there's going to be a few things that we need to pass down, right? So we have to pass down the actual data as a prop to this coin component so that it can render that data out. So first we need to pass in a key because we're rendering a list of something, and React always wants a key prop. And so let's go back to our data and see if we can find a good key prop. So let's go to our console. Looks like I don't have the data anymore. It's already got deleted. So let's go back to this API page just to see what the data looks like again. And so just looking through this, I mean, we have the ID, and that's probably the best option for what we should use as the key. So we'll pass in, this is going to be coin.id. Then we want to pass in one more prop for now. And I'm just going to call it coin, and this is going to have all the coin data for this specific coin. So we can just pass in coin. And we'll close that out. And it's just saying that this, it's throwing an error because we have to return this. All right, and then that error is just because we haven't defined coin yet. So let's go back to our components and let's create a new file, and we'll call this coin.js. And we're going to be receiving props. And we can actually destructure this because if you go back to coin list, we know we're passing the coin prop, and that's really the only prop we're passing down. So we can just destructure that out now. And so we'll get coin. And here we're going to render out, instead of a div, you have to keep in mind that the way that this app works is that any one of these items, if you click on it, it's going to take us to the detailed page. And so we have to change this to a link tag. So we have to import link from React Router DOM. And for now, we don't have where we're going to send this link yet. I haven't covered how that's going to work. So for now, we'll just send it to like a dummy link. So we'll just say send it to / coin detail or something. And then within this link, we're going to have a list element, and this is going to have a ton of classes. So just bear with me. We need coin list dash item, and then we need list dash group dash item. And this is already wrong. So this should be coin list, then list dash group dash item, and then list dash group dash item dash action. Then we need d dash flex, and then justify dash content dash between, and then align dash items dash center, and then text dash dark. I think that should be it. Then we need, if we take a look at what's going to be in this list item, we should have one image, and then I'm going to take and wrap these two data points within different span tags. And then lastly, we're going to have a font awesome icon for the delete. And so let's create the image. Now the source of the image, if we go back to our data, it's going to be under image right here. So we want coin.image. And this image is going to have a few classes as well. So we'll say we want coin list dash image. Actually, that's the only class we need. Then under the image, we want the two span tags. So I'm going to do span and then a class of text dash decoration dot none dash none. And this value, so this is going to be the price. And so that's going to be stored in, let's see, where is it? Current price. So we want coin.current price. Is it current underscore price? Yep. Then we want another span tag. And this is going to have a few classes. So we'll do text dash success and then mr-2. And this is going to render out, let's see, what's it called here? We want the price change 24 hours. So we'll just copy that. And we'll do coin dot. Now, before this span tag right here, we technically have to load up another font awesome icon. So we've got, where did it go? We've got the down and up arrows. So let's just hard code an arrow in there for now. So let's see. I'll just do an I tag. Actually, we want this within the span. So I'm going to do that right here. And so I'm going to do I.fas, fa-sort-down, and then align-middle, and then mr-1. And then lastly, outside of the span tag, we want to add one more font awesome icon. So we'll do I, and then have a class of delete-icon, and then far, and then fa-times-circle, and then text-danger. Okay, so this should be our coin component. So let's save everything, and hopefully this does something that we expect it to do. Coin is not defined. Oh, yep. So we have to import it into our coin list. So we'll do import coin from coin, and come on, work. Okay, it looks like things are working. All right, so we've rendered out the image, the value, as well as the percentage change. However, we've hard coded the color regardless of whether it went up or down, as well as the arrow. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. So let's go back to our coin and let's see how we can tackle this. So the first thing that we have to address is it's going to be this span tag right here, which handles the price change percentage. And we know that we're going to have to change the icon based off of what, whether it's increased or decreased. And so here, and we also have to change this text success right here. So once again, sorry if this is a little confusing, but this span tag is going to represent both of the arrow and this value. And so right now I set it to text-success. However, if we want it to turn red, this has to be changed to text-danger. So if I hit save now, everything turns red, right? So we have to dynamically render out our class names. So that's pretty easy to do. All we have to do is we'll just pass an expression and we'll say if coin dot price underscore change underscore percentage underscore 24h is less than 0, and we're going to do the ternary operator. We're going to say that if it's less than 0, I want to render out this as my class name. So text-danger and then mr-2, right? Because if it's less than 0, we want it to turn red. However, if it's greater than 0, we want to change this to text-success, which will make it green. And then mr-2, which is just to give a little margin on the right side. So let's save that. So everything turned green, but that's most likely because all of these are probably going up at the moment. So I know it's working now because I've tested this. Just trust me for now that that we're actually dynamically rendering out the different class names. All right, so we've got that. Now we have to adjust the direction of the icon. And so for us to do that, what we can say is for this section right here, I'm going to wrap that in an expression. So I'm going to say same exact thing. It's going to be a ternary operator. So I'm just going to grab this statement right here, paste that in, and we're going to say when it's less than 0, I want to render out the down arrow. That makes sense, right? But if it's greater than 0, I want to render out the up arrow. And so I'm just going to copy that and paste it in here. And just the difference between the up and down arrows, this one is fa-sort-down, and this is fa-sort-up. So if I hit save, oh, whoops. I've got this one right here, so we got to delete that. And so now if I hit save, looks like things are working. Let me see if I can add a few extra coins. Let's see. If I go to our watch list, and let's see, maybe Litecoin is going down. We need somebody that's going down. They're all going up. Let's see. What other coins could there be? Well, I don't know any other coins off the top of my head. Just trust me that this is working. Whoops, what happened here? Did we break something? Oh, looks like we actually went to coin detail. Okay. All right, so it looks like things are working. I don't like the fact that these list items are extending the width of our window, so let's change that. And if we go back to our coin summary page, I'm going to add some classes to this div. So we're going to put it inside a container like we normally do. So we'll do coin summary, coin summary, shadow border p-2, and then rounded. MT-2 and then BG-light. Although it looks like I'm not adding a container, so I'm probably adding the container someplace else. Let me double check. Yeah, so I'm adding the container actually in our app component, so within this div. I'll do class name equals container. Hit save all. There we go. That's exactly what I want to see. So now we've got a little padding around the edges. And it's just taking up, like about 80% of our screen. All right, guys. So I think this is a good stopping point. So I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, guys. So in this video, we're going to implement the delete functionality within our summary page. And I've noticed that I've actually forgotten a few classes within our coin component, because right now, if I hover over one of these components, we don't get that nice little delete icon. And the way I've set up the delete icon to pop up is that if I go to the app.css file, you'll see that I have a class for delete icon. And so I've set the display to none. So it's not going to be displayed. However, when we hover over anything with a class of coin, which I should have given to the list component, right? So anytime we hover anywhere on this entire coin component, we should see that X. So when we hover, then I want to take the delete icon class and set the display to block so that we can then see it. And the reason it's not working now is because I never actually assigned that coin class to anyone. So if we go back to coin, let's add a few classes here. So we want to add text-decoration-none, my-1, and coin. So if I hit save, and then we hover over this, you can see we've got the little red icon. And so if we click on it, it should ideally delete that specific coin from our watch list. But right now, all it does is just route us to that coin detail page, which is where we sent this link tag to. All right. And so to figure out how to actually tackle the deletion of the coin, let's go back to our coin list and see how everything is implemented. So first of all, the way we render out our data is based off of, the data that we get from CoinGecko is determined by this watch list. So the watch list is going to be responsible for determining what coins we're interested in receiving data for. So if we want to delete a coin, we want to delete it from that watch list array. And that watch list array is part of our context. And so it would make sense for us to delete a to handle the delete functionality within our context. So I'm going to define a function here and we'll just say handle delete. Or actually, I'll call this delete coin. I think that's a little bit better. So delete coin. And the way this is going to work is, first of all, we need some information on what coin we're deleting, right? So we have to pass the data from the coin component up to our context to let us know that what coin we want to delete. So we have to pass in the coin, and that's going to be the ID of the specific coin. And then we will pass this delete coin down, and I won't implement this functionality yet until we actually figure out how to pass the coin data. So I'll pass delete coin. And then if I go down to our coin component, actually, I don't want to put any extra logic into our coin component. Instead, all the logic resides in our coin list. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also destructure delete coin out of here. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass this event handler essentially down to our coin. So instead of just passing in one prop, I'm going to pass in a second prop called delete coin and say we want to pass down delete coin. Then when the I is selected, we're going to add an event handler. So we'll say I on click. So on click equals. And then we'll say, first of all, we need access to the event prop. And we're going to perform some action. So right now, the only thing we should do is well, first of all, let's destructure out delete coin. And we're going to say we want to, where did our function go? Right here. So we'll say delete coin. And we need to pass in the ID of the coin that we want to delete. So we'll do coin.id. Now I'm going to tell you guys ahead of time, this is not going to do what we expect it to do. So I'm going to do a save all. And let's see what happens. So we're going to go to our components and we'll watch the context to make sure that our WatchList context provider to make sure that our list removes whatever coin that we're interested in deleting. So I'm going to delete Litecoin. And so that's going to be that third element right here. So if I hit X, something unusual happens, right? Everything gets removed from the screen. Well, that's not exactly what's happening. Instead, if you take a look at the URL, you'll see that we got navigated to /coindetail. And you're probably thinking, well, why did we do that, right? I mean, we hit the delete button. Well, the problem is that if we go back to our code, you'll see that our entire coin component is wrapped in a link. So regardless of where we click on this component, it's always going to trigger that link behavior. And so that's going to create an issue because then if we don't want to navigate the user to that page when they just want to delete it. And so what we have to do is here, we need to say e.prevent default. So it's going to prevent the default behavior, which would be to navigate to that page. And I'm not sure if this is the best way of handling it. This is the only solution I found. If you guys know of a better solution, please let me know. Shoot me a message and then I can update this video with a better, more efficient solution. But so far, the way when I've tested this application, doing e.prevent default, I think e.prevent default is the one that I wanted. So let's test this out and see what happens. So if I hit X, perfect. So right now, if I click X, we don't navigate to the detail page. However, if I click anywhere else, we get navigated. Okay, so perfect. If we take a look at our array, you'll see that we didn't delete anything. And that's just because we haven't implemented the logic within our context. So let's implement delete coin. And what we want to do is very simple. All we have to do is we're going to set watch list. And we're going to use the filter function. So we're going to say watch list dot filter. And then we're going to pass the element. And we're going to say we want to return when element does not equal coin. So anytime the coin ID that we pass in matches, anytime the coin ID that gets passed in does not match element, we're going to add it to a new array that we're creating and then passing it into the set watch list function. And so basically, we're just taking our original array, we're removing the one coin that we delete, and then pushing that into set watch list so that we can update our state. And so I'm going to hit save, and let's see if our application works now. So if I hit X here, it looks like it did not work. So what's happening here? Let's take a look. And I actually already know what the issue is, but I think this is a good moment to really, for you guys to take a look and see if you guys can solve this yourself. It actually has something to do with use effect, but if you take a look at what's happening is that we've deleted Litecoin, right? And it got removed from our state from the WatchList context provider. And so to figure out why it's still staying on our screen, we have to go back down to our coin list component. And our coin list component, the way it works is we've got a use effect hook. And we're saying that when the component first renders, we want to fetch the data, right? And that's the only time we ever fetch data. And that's the and so since we're no longer fetching data, there's no other point in time in our code where we update coins, right? And because we never update coins, we're always going to render out every single bit of data that we have within our coins state. So that's the real problem, is that coins never changes even though we deleted that Litecoin. All we did was remove it from watchlist. So instead, what we could do is a very simple solution is we can update our dependency array to include watchlist, right? So that way, anytime watchlist gets updated, anytime our watchlist state gets updated, we're going to run this use effect hook. So that means that we're going to fetch our data again, right? And so it's going to fetch our data without the Litecoin because that's no longer part of the watchlist here. We'll then set coins to that new data. And because we set coins to the new data, we're going to re-render everything, and we'll re-render all the coins minus the Litecoin that we just deleted. So let's hit save all. And let's try this out. So if I delete Litecoin, looks like it's working. If I delete Ethereum, looks like it's working. If I delete whatever that is, looks like it's working. And then finally, if I delete this, something happened. And it looks like we're just getting a whole bunch of data all of a sudden, right? What happened here? Well, why did that happen? So let's take a look at our watchlist context provider. And you can see the state is an empty array. So we successfully deleted that final Bitcoin, but for some reason or another, we're loading all this data. And the reason for that is when we delete that last entry within watchlist, because watchlist changes, we then run the use effect hook again, right? Because it's part of our dependency array. And so then we run through this code, and what happens is we try to fetch data to the CoinGecko API, and we're running this watchlist.join, and we're joining basically an empty array. So we're passing in an empty string for IDs because there's nothing in the watchlist array. And the problem is that if we take a look at the CoinGecko documentation, when left empty for the IDs string, it returns the number of coins observing the params limit. So it's basically fetching a whole bunch of coins for us by default when we don't pass in the IDs manually ourselves. And so we get all of that data. We then set it to set coins, and then we render all of that data back out. So to fix this issue, all we have to do is just implement a very simple if statement. And so what we'll say is that when, let's see, where here, right above fetch data, we'll say if watchlist.length is greater than 0, so when the array is not empty, we want to actually fetch our data. And so let's see what happens now. And let's see if we fix that issue. All right, so let's delete Litecoin. Let's delete Ripple. Let's delete Ethereum. And let's delete Bitcoin. I select Bitcoin and nothing happens. So it looks like we broke our application further. Not exactly. Well, technically, yes, but this is a very simple fix. So let's take a look at exactly what happened to see why hitting the delete button on the final coin in our list doesn't actually delete what we want. So if we inspect our watch list context provider, right, we have deleted that last component, or sorry, that last coin that we were wanting to watch. So now we have an empty array, right? And because watchlist changes, right, because it originally had Bitcoin, but then we remove Bitcoin, which means watchlist updates, which means we're going to run the use effect hook once more. And so we're going to go through this. And so we're going to get down to this if statement, right? And it's going to say if watchlist.length is greater than 0, which it's not because it's empty, we'll fetch data. But since it's less than 0, we're not going to actually fetch the data. And because we never fetch the data, we never set coins or update it. And so our coins array, our coins state, if we go down to our coin list component, still has the data for the single Bitcoin. So the problem is that in the scenario where we've just deleted the final component, we never set coins again to be an empty array. So all we have to do is just say else set coins and then set it to an empty array because we have deleted that final cryptocurrency that we wanted to track. Okay, so now if I delete, and now if I delete, nothing. Perfect. Our application is working exactly the way we want it to. All right, so that felt like a fairly lengthy video, but I think this was probably a really good learning video for trying to figure out why our application's kind of behaving the way it is, and what was causing those little bugs that we kept running into. So hopefully you guys kind of have improved your troubleshooting abilities from that video, and you guys have a solid understanding of how state and context and use effect all kind of work together within this video. In the last video, we've pretty much wrapped up the coin list and coin components. So we've pretty much wrapped up our coin summary page. And so it's pretty much done. There's a few extra things we will still need to add, but that's going to be handled pretty much at the end of the project. So for now, I think we're going to just pretty much say that coin summary is done for now, and we're going to move on to the coin detail page. And if you recall, the way that the coin detail page works is that when we're on the summary page, we select one of these coins that we want to see more information about, and it's going to take us to that page. It's going to render out a nice chart that's going to show historical data. So if we hover over a specific point in time, it's going to give us the price of the coin at that specific date and time. We're also going to render out the current price and the current the past 24-hour percentage change, which is also going to be color coded based off of if the value has gone up or down. And then down here, we render out some extra data about the coin itself, like the market cap and whatnot, which, by the way, I still have no idea what any of these things mean, but I thought it would just make our application look a little nicer. So before we actually go about tackling this page right here, we have to figure out how to navigate to this page. Because if you recall, when we originally set up our routing for our application, we haven't implemented a route or anything for this page. So let's get started with doing that, although this is going to be a tad bit more complex than our traditional routing. If you take a look at the page URL for the detail page, you'll see that for the detailed Bitcoin, it's going to take us to /coins/Bitcoin, right? And if we go back and select, whatever this is, it takes us to coins/EOS. And if we select this one right here, it's going to take us to coins/OKB. So the way I've structured the URL is that for whatever coin we want to see a detailed page for, we're always going to go to /coins and then the ID of the coin. And you're probably thinking, so does that mean we have to define a separate route and separate components for each Bitcoin? Well, technically we could do an extra route like that. So we could do route and then path equals /coins/Bitcoin, and then, component. And we can say like something like coin, we can say something like a Bitcoin detail page, right? And then do that. And then if we wanted to add an extra coin to our application, which, we want to support more than one coin, we'd have to copy that and then make the next one, which would be like Ethereum. And then we'd have to create a new custom page for that and then call that Ethereum, right? And then within our pages, we'd have to add a separate page for each one. That's obviously a terrible way to go about this because basically we would have to duplicate all of our code for every Bitcoin we want to support. And that would be terrible for our application. So instead, what we want to do is we want to actually be able to pass in a variable in our URL. So instead of having this, we would just have one route and basically say that we want to load our coin detail page, right? Which we had already created here. And then basically we want to go to whenever the route is /coins/ and then some variable name, which is going to be our Bitcoin ID. We want to go to our coin detail page. And then within our coin detail page, we would extract that variable from the URL to determine which coin we want to see detailed information for. And that variable, is referred to as a parameter, okay? And so we can actually pass in a variable, just like I stated we would, by typing in a colon. So anytime the React router sees a colon, that's going to mean that whatever follows it is going to be a variable name. So here we can give it whatever name we want to. The name doesn't itself matter. So if I can call this ID, I can call this cryptocurrency, I can call this whatever. It doesn't matter. We just have to give it some kind of name that we can reference later in our application. So I'm going to give this the name of ID, right? It's going to be our Bitcoin ID. It makes sense. That's standard convention. So here, what's going to happen is, just to reiterate, if we go to a URL like coins/ and then OKB, OKB right here is going to actually be stored in that variable. So we can then reference ID anywhere in our application to figure out what coin we want to see more detail for. Then if we go back to our coin component, I know I said we were done with this, but we got to make one slight tweak. Right now, the link goes to coin detail, which is not where we want it to go. Instead, we want to go to coins, right? And then /, and then we want to go to the coin ID, right? So we want to make sure we actually send it to that route, or we want to make sure we update the URL so that we get the proper route match. Okay, so let's go to coin and figure out how we're going to do this. So we're probably going to need to do some kind of template string. So I'll do backticks, remember, and then we'll do /coins/ and then we want to pass in some variable, which is going to be coin.id, right? So the data that gets passed down in that coin prop is going to have that ID property, which we can then use to route towards /coins/ and then our ID. So let's hit save, or save all in this case. And let's see if our application is doing what it's supposed to do. So let's hit this. Okay, so it routed to /coin/Bitcoin. So it looks like it's working, but right now we have just an empty coin detail page. All right, so the first thing that coin detail page is going to have to do is actually retrieve that ID, or that parameter, right? So to do that, there's a special hook within React Router, I believe, and that's called use params. So what we can do is we do use params. We call that hook, import it in there, and we just take that and we store it in a variable. So we'll do const, and then we want to, you know what? Let's just do const x for now, and I'm just going to print out x. So let's see what that looks like. Console.log and then x. Hit save. I'm going to change the URL back to /. And so if I hit, the Bitcoin, it takes me to /coin/Bitcoin. And if I go to console, you'll see I get an ID of Bitcoin, right? And if I change this to Ethereum, I get ID equals Ethereum, right? And so this property, this object comes from the URL parameters, and we've got one parameter, and that's going to be ID, right? And ID, remember, comes back from right here, this variable that we assigned to it. So if we change this to cryptocurrency, hit save, right? Now the property is called cryptocurrency, and then the value is going to be set to whatever is stored here. So we've now extracted that variable, but I want to just destructure it and grab ID because that's all we really care about. That's the only one there right now, but in the future, if we add more parameters, then we need to factor that in as well. So I'm going to extract that, and I'm going to make sure that we change this back to ID. We'll save all, and let's just double check that I didn't break it. Of course, I broke something. What did I do? Coin detail. Yep, we don't need a console.log anymore. All right, and yep, everything's working just fine. So let's go back to our completed app and see what we need to implement. So it looks like we can really break down our page into two different components. So we'll have a chart or a graph component, and then we'll have like a coin data component or something just to give some extra data about the coin. So there's really just going to be those two components. And so let's go ahead and add those in now. Now that we got the routing in place, in the next video, we're going to work on breaking down the detail page into multiple components. And we'll get those components sorted out in that video. All right, so I'll see you guys there. Now that we've got the navigation in place between our summary page and our detail page, let's start building out our detailed page. And if we take a look at it, I think it makes sense to break it down into two different components. We'll have our chart component at the top, and then we'll have our, I don't know what you want to call this. We'll just call this like detailed coin data or something like that. So we'll have two different components. And I think most of the logic, I think we're going to put within the detailed page. So the detailed page is going to be responsible for fetching data from the API. And then it's going to pass that data down as props into our chart component so that I can render it out, as well as into our detailed data component. All right, so let's go ahead and create those two components. And so this one I'm just going to call history chart.js. And then the second component is going to be called coin data. And let's render both of those out onto this page. And instead of just rendering it directly within the return statement, I'm going to call a function. So I'm just going to do render data. And we're going to define this function because there's going to be some logic we'll need to add to it. Well, actually, we haven't implemented the loading. I got ahead of myself. So leave that out for now. We'll just do a return, and then I'm going to return a div. And we're going to add a class name to this. So we'll do class name equals CoinList. And then we need to import our history chart, as well as our coin data. All right, we'll save all of that. We shouldn't see anything on the screen yet if we go back to our application, so it should be empty. However, if we go into our components, a tab, and then go down to coin detail, we should have our history chart as well as our coin data. Okay, so we've got those two components set up. Now we actually have to retrieve the data that we want. So if we go back to our coin detail page, within this ID, we'll have the ID of the coin that we want to see detailed information from. However, we got to figure out what information we need. So first of all, this is way too big. And let's see. There's a couple of different endpoints we can use, but what I am specifically interested in is going to be the market chart endpoint. So we haven't used this one yet. I think what were we using before? We were using markets, but now we want market chart. And that's basically going to give us historical data and that's basically going to give us historical data. So if you look at the fields that we pass in, so we're going to pass in the ID. We're going to pass in the currency we want to see the data for. And then lastly, we want to see the day. So how many days back should we go to get data for? And if you look at our application, this is where it gets a little tricky, but we have 3 different charts, right? So we should see one chart for 1 day. So for 1 day, then we should also get data for 7 days, and we should also get data for 1 year. And so I figured what would be easiest would be to just send 3 API requests to this endpoint and get it for 1 day, 7 days, as well as 365 days. So let's go ahead and get that implemented. So we're going to be using the use effect hook like we normally do. So we'll do use effect. And we're going to define a function in there. Will be const fetch data. It's going to be async function. And what we can do is we can do a, well, first of all, we got to import our API. So we'll do import CoinGecko from APIs and then CoinGecko. And then here, what we can do is const results equals, and then we'll do an await, and then we can do CoinGecko.get. And what we want to do is we want to go to the slash market. Well, we want to do actually, what is the, whoops. Let's go back to this market chart and let's just fill out this real quick. Let's just see what the full URL looks like. So Bitcoin, USD, and then let's just say 1 day for now. And let's do, you know what? Let's do 7 days. Execute. And yeah, so we want to go to V3 coins. But you'll see this is where it changes up a little bit. So we want to go to slash coins. Then we have to embed the ID within there, then market chart. And then we have to pass in all the extra parameters like VS currency and things like that. So this is going to be a little bit more challenging. So instead of just hard coding something in, we're going to have to use template strings. And we'll say slash coins slash, then we need to get the ID. And I'm going to actually change this to coin. I think that makes more sense because it's the coin name. And then I'm going to say this is going to be coin. And then slash market underscore chart. Then we need to pass in an object. And this is going to have our parameters. So we want VS underscore currency. That's going to be USD. And then the number of days. So for now, we'll just say, I mean, we can do like 1 or 2 or 7. For now, I'm just going to do 1. Let's save that. And we're going to want to just run this once when we mount the component. And after we get results, let's see, where's that end? Right here. Wait, yes, right here. We want to do a console.log results.data. So let's do a save all. And we're going to go back here and let's just do a refresh. So we're going to go to the Ethereum URL. And if I go back to console, I did not print out anything. And that's because we never actually called fetch data. So now if I search, looks like we got an error, and it's probably because, oh, look, undefined. What happened here? Oh, that's right. I changed this to coin. You know what? Let's leave it as ID, or then we have to go back to the route and then change the parameter, but ID is fine. So let's just leave that as ID. All right. So we got our data back, and within there, we need to, we get a few things. We only care about prices. So we want to go under the prices per property. And then within there, we've got a array of 287 points. And then within our array, we have another array. So it's an array of arrays. And within the nested array, there's going to be two items. There's the first item, which is the timestamp, and then there's the actual price. Okay. So let's save that data. And so we're going to want to do that by using the useState hook. So we'll do const coin data, set coin data equals useState. I'm going to set this to an empty object. And first of all, we got to import useState. And then we want to pass in that empty object. Well, actually, it's going to be a list at first. Eventually, we'll change that to an object. You'll see why in a bit, but keep that as an array. And then what we want to do is we want to, after we console.log, let's set coin data. And we're going to set it to results.data. Remember, we want to get to the prices property. That's going to be the array that we're interested in. And so that's going to be prices. Hit save. And if we go to our components and then go to coin detail page, you should see our state. And we've got our array stored in there with all the data that we need to graph it. Okay, so we've kind of got the data we need, although we ultimately want to be able to, show 1 day's worth of data, 7 days, and 1 year. So we're going to retrieve the data from the endpoint, the API endpoint, 3 times for each of these. So what we're going to have to do is, you're probably thinking, well, what do we do? You might think we can do, results day, and then that's going to return the day, and then we can copy this, right? And then take that and then set this to results week and set this to 7 days. And then we can copy this and do results year. And then we set that to 8, right? And this would technically work. And we could then change this to an object. Like I said, we would, and then say, we want to set this data to be like this. So we'll pass in an object where day is going to be set to day, and then it's going to be set to results day, and then week is going to be set to results week, and then this should be a capital Y, and then year is going to be set to results year. So now if we hit save, we should then go back to our component and let's check out our coin details page. Hopefully the page refreshed. I can't tell, but let's go to our state, and you'll see our state is now an object, and it's going to be an object where there's 3 different properties. It's going to be the day, week, and year. And each one of these properties is going to contain all of our data. Well, so technically we probably should have done results day dot price. So we just get the price. We don't really care about like the market average and things like that. And then price again. So let's hit save and let's take a look. Now, what happened here? Yep, that should be data.price. And then data.price. All right, I think this is what it should look like now. So if we take a look, it's still undefined. Well, clearly I'm messing something up. Let's do a console.log and see what that data actually looks like, because I already forgot. And let's see results year. And let's see. So we want data, and then, it's prices, of course. All right, and now back to the React Dev Tools, and let's make sure our state looks exactly the way we want it to. So you've got the 3 properties, and then each property is going to have a value of the array, which is going to be an array of arrays. All right, so we've got our data looking exactly the way we want it to. However, there's one minor/major issue. So if we go to our network tab and we hit this XHR and fetch tab, this is going to show us all of the API calls that we made. And I want to show you something. look at the timing of our API call. So we make a call for the days equals to 1. And then if you look at the way we set up our code, we're going to await that. So we're going to wait till that completes and we get a result, right? And we can see that with this green, don't highlight that. We see that with that green bar. Then only once that we receive this data back from the server can we then start the next call, right? Which is results week, which is going to get a week's worth of results. So then we send it for days equals 7. And then we start the request. Then we have to wait until we get that response back. Then once we get that response back, we have to send another one to, why does that say 8 days? Okay, well, that should be 365 days. But either way, you guys get the point. This is a bad design because we have to wait for each one to come back before we can send the next request. It would make much more sense to send all of this, to send all 3 requests out at the same exact time and handle all 3 of those concurrently, right? And that way, you should see our overall time get reduced significantly because this takes 42 milliseconds plus 47 plus 62, right? So that's about like what? Like 150 milliseconds that we have to wait before we get all of the data that we need. So how do we go about actually sending all 3 of these requests at the same time and then awaiting all of them together instead of waiting for one, then waiting for the next one, and then waiting for the next one? Well, we can do that with the promise.all. So if we do promise.all, we can then pass in an array of promises, which, if you look at this, the CoinGecko call or that AJAX object, it's going to return a promise. So we can pass in these promises. So I'm going to copy this from up to all the way up to here, actually. Yep, right here. And I'm just going to cut that. So that's going to be for the day. Then that's going to be the first promise. Then we can add in another promise. So I can just copy this same exact data and then paste that in there, right? And this is going to be for 7 days. And then I'm going to copy that one more time and paste that in there. And this is going to be for 365 days. And then what we want to do is we want to delete all this nonsense. I messed something up. Hold on. We want, let's see, this should go. This should go. This all should go. Why is this thrown in there? I have to close this out. So so I didn't mean to copy the promise.all. I just wanted to copy the CoinGecko and on. So we want to delete this. We don't want that. We just want the different promises that we're going to retrieve. Okay, so hopefully, let me save this just so that it gets reorganized. So basically, we have this promise.all, and then we pass in an array of promises. So CoinGecko.get, this is going to return one promise. This will return another promise, and this will return a promise, another promise. So we're passing in an array of promises. And what we want to do is we want to await those. And then we're going to set this equal to a value. So we'll do const. And then we have to destructure the values that we want returned. So we'll do day, week, year. And then we're going to have to change what we're saving our data as. So it's no longer called results day. Instead, it's just going to be called day. And then we've got week. And then we've got year. So let's test this out and run this. In theory, this should send out all of the requests all at once and get them roughly back at the same time so that we basically cut our wait time by a third, essentially. So let's hit save. And I'm going to refresh that. Something odd happened. Whoops. I go to Bitcoin. Okay, there we go. This is what I want to see. So you can see that we sent all 3 requests at the same exact time. And so the total amount of time it took was 132 seconds, which is because the 365-day request took the longest. But since they all ran at the same time, it's not like we had to wait for one to finish before we could tack on the next one. And so this saves us a lot of time and makes the user experience a whole lot better because the user doesn't have to wait as long to get all of his data. Now, if we go back to our state, we will have to make a few modifications. Looks like we didn't retrieve our data properly. All of our data is undefined, so let's see what went wrong. Before we set our data, I'm just going to do a console.log, and we're going to log out. Let's just do day. And it looks like we're not getting any data back. That can't be right. Oh, sorry, guys. I see the mistake. This should be an array that gets destructured. So this should be changed to brackets. And now, if we check our state, there we go. So now we have all of the data that we asked for. The only problem is we need to go back into data and grab prices. So we'll do day.data.prices. And then the same thing with week and year. And now if we check our state, it looks exactly the way we want it to. Now, this was a pretty decently lengthy video. Before we wrap this up, I realized there's one more thing or one more set of data that we need to fetch. So if we go back to our application, we need to get the detailed data again. And so what we have to do is we have to go back to that original endpoint that we were using, which is coin/markets. And we need to get the data for that specific coin that we want. So I'm going to tack on a third promise onto here. Sorry, a fourth one. So let's see. It's going to get tacked on right here. I'm just going to copy this. Actually, we can copy the request from where's coin summary? Coin list. We can copy this exact request. And we can paste it back into coin detail page. So it's going to go right here. We don't need this. This is going to get changed to ID because that's the only ID that we care about. And then we need to destructure out that data. So that's going to be called detail. And we'll do a detail equals detail.data. And let's just make sure that looks good. So we've got our detail, and detail returns an array. And then the first element in our array is what we're interested in. Now, since we're always going to just request one coin on the detail page, let's go ahead and just grab that first element because that's the only element that'll exist. So we might as well take that out now. And so if we check our state, our detail has all of the data. Perfect. All right, so I think that's enough for this video. We'll take a break here and continue in the next one. This will be a real quick video. I just want to make sure we set up the loading functionality on this page as well. So since we are fetching data, I do want to provide some feedback to the user that we're loading or fetching the data. So we can just do what we normally do, just set up some state for that. And then right before we fetch the data, I'm going to set is loading to true. And then right after we set this data, we have to then set it back down to false. So set is loading to false. And then when we render our data, we want to conditionally render it. So we'll do if is loading. And I'm just going to do the same thing we did on the other page, just return a div for now and just say loading. And we can save that. And looks like everything's good. That's all I wanted to do for this video. Now that we've set up our coin detail page to fetch the interested data, I think it's time we move on to start working with our charts. And for working with charts, there's a lot of different libraries that you're going to use. For this project, we're going to make use of Chart.js. And so we're going to want to install that. We'll do npm install. What was I supposed to do? Let's see. Hold on. Let me go to get started. Npm install chart.js. And while that's happening, let's go back to the introduction page right here. And this is going to give us an example of how to create a chart. Okay. So what we have to do is, and this is just giving an example in plain JavaScript, so we kind of got to convert it to React. But we have to define a canvas element, and that's where the chart's going to get rendered. So let's go to our history chart page, and where we're returning a div, let's render out a canvas. And so I'm just going to do canvas. We'll give it an ID, my chart. And then let's just define a width equals 250. And a height. So we have to give it the dimensions for our actual canvas. I'm just going to set everything to 250 pixels. And then close that out. All right, so we've got our canvas. Now, the example shows that they define a variable and then they actually grab a reference to the canvas that they created. And in React, right, we don't do a document.get element by ID in React. Instead, normally, if we ever want to reference a DOM element, we have to use the use ref hook, right? We have to add a ref to the canvas. So let's set that up. So we're going to do const, and we'll just call it chart ref. And that's going to be set to use ref. And we got to import that first. And then here, to actually reference this DOM element, we need to do a ref equals. And then we're going to set this equal to chart ref. So anytime we ever want to reference this DOM element, all we have to do is just call this variable chart ref. All right. And so now, once we do that, what we have to do is we have to create a new chart. And so let's go ahead and do that. And what I want to do is I want to render the chart basically whenever the component loads up. So we're going to use the use effect hook like we normally do. And within here, I first want to make a quick check. So I want to say if chart ref is defined and chart ref.current, right? So I'm worried that maybe the canvas will get rendered before the use effect hook runs. Sorry, I'm worried the opposite happens where we run the use effect hook, but the canvas hasn't been rendered yet. So this is just to make sure that chart ref actually has a value. And now we want to actually create our chart instance. So we can do const call chart instance equals, and then we need a new chart, Chart.js. And then we have to pass in, did I misspell that? New Chart.js. I forgot to import chart.js. So we'll do import chart.js from chart.js. All right, so those errors went away. And here we have to pass in two things. So we have to pass in here CTX, which is the reference to that object. And then the second thing is a whole bunch of config parameters and options. And for the configs, there's three things that we really need to pass in, three main things. We have to pass in the type of chart. So in this example, it's doing a bar chart, but we probably want a line graph. Then you have to pass in the actual data. And then lastly, we've got a whole bunch of options for the actual chart, and that can modify a ton of different things like the way the chart looks, the way it behaves, and things like that. So for now, uh, let's fill out these parameters. So the first one is going to be the reference to the chart. So we're going to do chart ref. And then for the second part, for the actual chart config, I'm just going to copy this as an example, just so we can test it out and see what it looks like. So let's copy that and save that in there. And let's take a look. Didn't do anything. All right, guys, I found my mistake. So I forgot to make this dot current, because you got to use the dot current property to actually get the actual reference. So now if I hit save, I think it should render out a chart. Okay, so we've got a chart. And you can see that, well, first of all, it's a little too big, but it's a bar graph, and it's got, you know, a column for red, blue, yellow, green, purple, and orange. And you'll see that the data values for these guys is all stored here. So 12, 19, 3, 5, 2, and 3. And then the labels for the x-axis are, you know, red, blue, and yellow. So that's how you configure this. We're going to have to modify this so that we can plot what we want to plot. So let's go to, first of all, we're going to have to tweak this and change this to a line graph. And if I hit save and take a look at it now, okay, so it's looking a little better. But we actually want a specific line graph. And so when we go down to line graph, it's going to show you how to set it up. It's going to give you a few options. But what's important for us is that on the axes, we want it to be a time value, right? So we want the x-axis to be the time, and then the y value be the dollar. So the way that we actually have to structure our data is we have to pass in a array of data, right? As you can see right here. And then the array should contain an object, or the array should be an array of objects, where each data point is an object where there's two properties, where the date and time is on the x property or the t property. We can call it whichever we want. And then the value is on the y property. So if we go back to our data, actually, before we do that, you know what I want to do? I'm going to change this for a second, and I'm going to delete all of this nonsense. So I'm going to remove all of this. And then I'm going to change our data. So I'm going to say our data is going to be an object where the x is set to, let's just say 1, and the y is set to 15. And then I'm going to create a new data point. I'm going to say x is set to 2, and y is going to be equal to 12. And then let's just keep adding a few more just so we can get enough to make it look like a chart. X equals 3. And the y property is going to be set to 25. And we don't need these labels anymore, so I'll delete that. Let's hit save, and let's see what it rendered out. I don't know if you guys can see this because it's black on black, but let me change the color real quick. So if you want to change the background color, we can go right into this property right here. So outside of data, we want background color, and then we'll just say RGBA equals 174, comma 305, comma 194, and then 0.5. Hit save. Okay, so we've colored the basically the data under the line. So you can kind of see our chart, and it's kind of coming together. It's got these 2 points. I thought we had 3 points. Can't really see the x-axis because that's gone. But let's work on making this chart a little bit more visible. And so what I'm going to do is for this chart or this canvas that we're rendering out, I'm going to change the structure of our HTML, and I'm going to say when we return this, I'm going to take another div, And I'm going to wrap that original div that we had. And I'm going to give that parent div a class name of bg-white border m2-2 rounded and then p-3. And then beneath here, we're going to add an extra div, but it's going to remain empty for now. So we've got a parent div, then just another set of divs. Then we've got the div wrapping the canvas. And I think that should be it for now. So let's check this. It should give us a white background. Okay, so that's a lot better. And so you can see now that we've got a chart. However, there's no x-axis, so I'm not even sure what values it's grabbing. But that's okay. We're going to figure this out. But we have to pass in some configuration options. So let's see. We're going to need to change the x-axis to be a type of time. So that's what we're missing. And so let's go ahead and do that. But first, you'll notice that our configs is kind of getting out of hand, right? Like, look at all of this. So instead, I want to take our options section and I want to define this in a separate file, and then we can import it so that we can keep our component code relatively short. So let's go to our source folder, and I'll make a new file, and I'll call this chart configs. Well, first of all, that's not a folder I'm making. That's a file. I need a folder. New folder. And then what did I call it? Chart configs. And then we'll make a new file in there, and I'll just call this I'll just call it chart configs, whatever. And here I'm going to just export an object that I'm defining here. And so I'm going to call this history options. And this is going to be an object. And so this object is going to represent, if we go back to the introduction, this is going to represent everything for the options section so that we can define it all in a different page. And just so, I don't want to dive too deep into the specifics of customizing Chart.js because it's not really React specific. That's just another library. But these are going to be the options that we need. So we need line, height, annotation. And so we're going to do always and set to true. And then hover is going to be set to false. And then line weight will be set to 1.5. Then we're going to add another property. So we're going to add an animation. So if we go back to our final app and we reload, you see that it kind of animates up. So that's what this is going to do. So we're going to do an animation of, and then we provide a duration. So I'm just going to say 2 seconds. So it's going to take the animation a full 2 seconds to complete. Then we want maintain aspect ratio and set to false. And so what this option is doing is that when you notice if I shrink it, right, it gets a little smaller, but then it can also get wider, but I don't maintain that same square aspect ratio because I set the canvas to 250 pixels, both for the width and the height. So that would mean that to maintain aspect ratio, it would always have to be a square, and I don't really want that. Then we want to make it responsive. Then we have to adjust our scales. So we want, for the x-axis, we're going to pass in grid lines. And actually, we don't need that in there. We can skip that, and we'll just do type. So this is what's going to make the x-axis a time-based axis. Wait, what happened here? Scales. Oh, there should be another object. Yeah, this config is kind of a pain. This actually took me quite a while to get down. I don't know if it's just because I'm dumb or if Chart.js documentation sucks because they don't give you any examples. Like they just give you that one example, which is not helpful at all. And so distribution, and then we'll set that to linear. And then that's going to be the end of that. Then we want to set the, actually I think that's it. So we're going to export this history options and we're going to pass it, where is it? History chart. So what we'll do is, where does this close? Closes right there. I'm going to delete all of that and then pass in history options. And then if I hit tab, this should auto import it. So let me just double check. So I imported history options. It's a named import from the chart configs. And so that's going to make our configs look a lot smaller since we're storing all of that nonsense over there. I hit save and okay, we've got something going right now. It kind of looks like what we want. We've got some times and then we got different values that we provided. So we've got the x-axis and the y-axis. Obviously, this doesn't represent a real time. So I guess it's kind of confusing and it's translating it to, what is that, like 7 o'clock or something? I don't even know what that is. But let's go ahead and add a few extra config options. I think this is going to wrap that part up real quick. So we want to change, we got the background color. We also want a border color. This is just styling, guys, so don't worry too much about it. 305, 194, and 0.4. All right. And actually, we want the point radius. So what I'm doing with the point radius is you'll see that there's a little dot for each point that we defined, which is fine for a graph like this, but we're going to have, hundreds and hundreds of data points. So there's like a billion little dots that'll get rendered out if we don't have this, and it kind of makes it look ugly. So I'm going to set this to point radius of 0, so there won't be any circle around it. And for now, I think that's good. Let's save that. The label is incorrect still. We'll update that later though, because it says number of votes. Uh-oh. What did I just, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Oh, look at you guys, Chart.js. Putting in cool ass features. All right. So we've got that going. Now let's actually pass our real data down to this chart. So first of all, our data is in the wrong format. So if we go back to, let me pull up the React Developer Tools. And you'll see that our data, unfortunately, comes in this format where we have our array, but the time and the value are stored in another array within the array. That's not what we want. We want it to store it in an object where the time is set to the x value and the data or the value is set to, or the price is set to y. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to transform our current array of arrays and turn it into an array of objects. So let's go back to coin detail page. And what we're going to do is we're going to perform a little JavaScript magic. So I'm going to define a function up here. And it's called format data, which equals, so we're going to input data. And so we're going to take these arrays that get returned, and we're going to pass it into this function, which is going to transform those arrays. So we want to return a new array, and that new array is going to come from this map method. And what we're going to do is when we iterate over, wait, that is what I wanted. So EL, we're going to iterate over each element within the array, and we're going to return an object and basically say that we want the time object to be set to EL 0, right? And then we want the Y object, the Y property to be set to 1. So let's hit save. And we want to pass all of these arrays into this format data function. So we'll just do format data. And then just do that for the other two as well. All right, let's save that. What did we do? Data.map is not a function. Excuse me? What did I do wrong, guys? Oh, all right, I see the mistake. We don't need to format this data for the detailed format, for the detailed object. So now if we do save, all right, looks like it's working. If we check our state, we now have an array of objects where the time is set to the T property and the price is set to the Y property. Now, one thing I don't like is, we get this large decimal, which we don't want. We just care about the first two places because that's how many cents we ever show. So we want to basically truncate it right there. And that's pretty easy to do. All we got to do is a dot to fixed and then 2. And so now if we take a look at it, that's much prettier. All right, so we formatted our data. Now we have to pass this data down into our history chart component. But my mouth is getting a little tired from talking, so I think we can take a break right here, and then the next video we'll hopefully finish up the rest of the chart stuff. All right, guys. So now that we've got our data formatted in the way that Chart.js expects it, let's go ahead and take our data, which is going to be stored in our state coin data, and pass it down to our chart component. So we're just going to pass it down as a standard prop. So I'll just call it data, and then pass down coin data. And then what we want to do on history chart is let's destructure out data. And then let's destructure a little bit further. So I'm going to do const, and then we'll grab day, week, year, and detail from our data. All right, so day is going to hold all of the historical values for a single day. Week, we'll do a week, and a year, we'll do a year, and then detail, we'll just get the information about the current value and information about the coin itself. So what we want to do is, for now, let's just hard code our data to always display. Let's hard code our chart to always display the single day data. And so what we can do is we can remove this from here. We can remove the array, and I'm just going to pass in day. And I think that should be the only thing we need. Cannot destructure property day of data as it is undefined. Yep, I forgot to hit save all. All right, and so now we've got a chart, which doesn't look half bad. So it's actually rendering out the data. If we hover over these points, we get values, or we should. I don't know if it's just a little slow. There we go. Our chart's a little massive though, so let's work on getting that scaled down a bit. And actually, I see a mistake that I'm making. What we want to do actually is let's take this, and I think this should fix our issue. So we're going to take our history options and spread it out, history options, and then spread it out within options. And I think that should fix it. So that's still a little big. I don't know why it's not being it should be smaller, and it should be a little bit more responsive. Well, it looks like it is responsive, but it keeps filling up the whole screen. Well, anyways, we'll come back to fixing that a little bit later. Let's finish implementing all of the logic for the chart. So we've got our data rendered out. However, our label is still wrong, right? So it still says number of votes. And we want our label to be the name of the coin. So we can just take this out. and just say this is going to be set to, we're going to pass in a template string, and we'll say detail.name, and then price. So it should say something like Bitcoin price or whatever. So we get an error when this happens, and most likely we just need to make sure up here that basically our props gets passed down. So we want to make sure we do detail. So if detail exists, then run this. Okay, there we go. So we've got the Bitcoin price updated. Now going back to our completed app, we've got the current value as well as the percent change getting rendered out at the top left. So let's implement that. And remember, this is also needs to be colored accordingly based off of whether it's going down or up. So I'm going to go down here, and then here I'm going to define a function called render prices or render price. And then I'm just going to say const render price. And if detail exists, I want to return the following. So we'll do a p tag with the class of my-0. And then within here, that's going to say detail.current underscore price. And then we want to change it to fixed. What is it? To fixed. And so that's only going to give us the last two decimals. And then below this p tag, we need to pass in another p tag. And this is going to be a little bit trickier though. So we got to do class name equals. And then we'll say, we'll pass a ternary operator and say if detail.price underscore change underscore 24h is less than 0, we want to add the classes that'll make it, wait, did I mess this up? This should be 0. But we want to add the classes that will make it turn red. So text-danger will make it turn red. And I'm going to add some vertical padding as well. And then we want, if it's greater than 0, we want text-success and then my-0. And I think that should be it. However, it's going to throw an error right now because it says we can't return two JSX, child elements or sibling elements. So we can just wrap it in a fragment. Let's test that out. All right. Wait, what happened here? Yep, mistake. I got to wrap this in curly braces so it actually treats it as a JavaScript function. All right, so we've got the value, but it's not rendering out the, oh yeah, I didn't actually pass in a value here. So we'll do detail.price underscore change underscore percentage underscore 24h. And then we want .2 fixed again. All right, so that looks good. And we've got that done. I could put a $sign here and put in a % here, but who really cares? Now the next thing we need to implement are the buttons so that we can load up the different data. Because right now we're always just rendering a day's worth of data. So for that, we probably need to implement some sort of state. And so we'll do const, and then I'm going to call this, we'll call it time format. And then set time format. And that's going to equal use state. And we'll say the default time format is 24 hours. And we got to import use state. And I'm going to define a function that's going to handle the logic for what state the user is going to want to see. So we'll do a const determine time format, which equals that. And we're going to say, we're going to add a switch statement here. So we'll do a switch, and it's going to be on the state variable time format. So when the time format is set to 24H, we want to return day. That's going to be returning this object. That's going to be the array that stores all the data for a single day. And then if the case is set to 7 days, I'm going to return week. And then if case is set to 1 year, we're going to return year. And then default, let's just do a catch on, just return day if that's the case. Save, it's going to format that. And what we want to do is for data, we're going to just call determine time format. So this will run, and then based off of whatever time format set to, it's going to return either day, week, year, or day again if it doesn't match any one of those, but it will always match one of those. So now if we hit save, it should return a single day's worth of data, which it is. And you'll see that, well, actually ignore that. So we've got that part set up. Now we actually have to render out some buttons so the user can determine which one he wants, right? So if we go back to our finished app, we've got 3 buttons right here. So let's add those to the UI. Then under this div right here that wraps our canvas, we're going to put a new div, and we're going to add the class of chart-button and then empty-1. And we're going to create a button with the class of btn and then a class of btn-outline-secondary and then btn-sm. And we're going to copy that so that we have 3 of them. The first one's going to say 24 hours. The second one will say 7 days. And the last one will say 1 year. And for the middle one, we want to add 1 extra class. So it's going to be mx-1 just to give it a little space between the buttons. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. All right, so we've got the 3 buttons. So things are looking good. And then we just want to set some on-click event handlers. We're going to say if this button is clicked, we want to set time format to be, this is the button for 24 hours. So we can just set to 24 hours. And then let's just copy this, paste it on these buttons as well. And then we just have to update what we're going to set the time format to. So this should be 7 days and this should be 1 year. So let's take a look and let's see if this works. So if I try 7 days, all right, it looks like it's updating to 7 days. If I do 1 year, awesome. So we got our buttons working now. Okay, guys, so I figured out why the chart was taking up the entire screen, and that's because I had an extra N here on maintain aspect ratio, so that misspelling was causing it to break. So if I hit save now, we should see our chart now take up a reasonable amount of space and still be responsive. Okay, guys, so I figured out why the chart was taking up the entire screen, and that's because I had an extra N here on maintain aspect ratio, so that misspelling was causing it to break. So if I hit save now, we should see our chart now take up a reasonable amount of space and still be responsive. All right, guys, so I think we've pretty much wrapped up the chart component. And now I think it's time we moved on to making our coin data component. And so we've already created the component here. Right now, there's no actual code in there. So let's get started on making that. The first thing it needs the detailed data. And so if we go back to our coin detail page, you'll see that we're passing our coin data down to history chart, but we also need to pass it to coin data. However, we don't actually need all of coin data. We don't need to have all the arrays for the historical data. So we'll just get coin data.data, right? So just this field right here, because that's going to contain all of this information. And then now if we go back to coin data, we're going to make sure we pass in props. And all we're going to do here is we're going to call a function called return render data. And then we'll define it up here. So we'll do const render data. And now all we're going to do is, well, first of all, let's destructure out data. And now we're just going to render out a whole bunch of divs. And this is going to actually take quite a bit of time. So just bear with me because there's a ton of classes we got to add. So, so let's get started. So we'll do div with the class of bg-white, and then a class of mt-3, and then a class of p-2, and then rounded, and then border, and then row. And then within that, we want another div with a class of called sfm, called s-sm. And actually, before we continue, we want to actually put this all within a condition. So we'll do if data exists, then we want to render all of this goodness out. If data and then return. There we go. Then let's go within this div again, and I'm going to add another div, and that's going to have a class of d-flex and a class of flex-column. And then within there, we want a span tag. So we'll do span with the class of text-muted, and then coin-data-category. And so this is going to represent the market cap. And then beneath that, we're going to add another span tag. And so now we're going to pass in data.marketCap. Then beneath that, we need an HR tag. And then we're going to add another div. So this is going to be dot d-flex and dot flex-column. And then we're going to add a span. And that's going to have a class of text-muted, and then a class of coin-data-category. And so we're going to have the total supply on this one. And so beneath it is going to be the value of total supply. So we'll add another span tag, and that's going to be data.total_supply. And then beneath this one, we need to add another div with a class of call-sm. This is going to create another column. And just to speed things up, I'm going to copy from this div down to, I believe it's, hold on, where's this guy's closing div? Is it this guy? Yeah. So from here up to here, we're going to copy that and paste it in here just to save some time, because it's exactly the same thing. The only difference is we need to, whoops, I may have, let's see, hold on. Where did I mess this up? Yep, that's where I messed up. So sorry, guys. So we should have. Hold on. We need to delete these two guys. So this is where we left off. Now let me copy. Where is it? Here we go. So from here up, and then I'm just going to paste that down here. There we go. That's better. And then I'm going to go down one more and then paste it again. All right. So this is going to give us 3 different columns. The only things that we have to change are the headers and the values. So under this one, this is going to be volume, 24 hours, and it's going to be data, probably volume. No, it's going to be total volume. And then this one is going to be a high 24 hours. And this is going to be data high underscore 24H. And then for the last two, we got circulating supply. And data dot circulating supply. And then lastly, we want to knock out, what is this? Low 24 hours, and then data dot low underscore 24 hours. So hopefully this is going to do exactly what I wanted to do. What? Oh, this should be wrapped in brackets. And looks like it's doing nothing. So what happened here? Oh, sorry guys, I figured out the mistake. So I was supposed to pass down detail, and I accidentally passed down data. So let's fix that. And I think we should be done with that section. There we go. So there's no high 24, but I suspect I did something wrong there. Probably, definitely. So let's go back to where's high 24. Yep, that's a typo. All right, so we finished that. And so that's pretty much going to wrap up the coin detail page. The last thing we need to do is if we go back to our home page or our summary page, we need to add in that add coin button. All right, so that we can add different coins as well as delete coins. All right, so we'll tackle that in the next video. Okay, guys, let's move on to implementing our add coin button. And if we take a look at the completed app, you'll see that the add coin component is nothing more than a simple drop-down menu. So you click the button, you're going to get a drop-down menu of the different cryptocurrencies that we support. And I hard-coded these specific cryptocurrencies just because, there's over 1,000 different cryptocurrencies that we can track. And if you actually go to the CoinGecko API and you go to the /coin/list endpoint, you can see all the coins they support. And once again, it's over 1,000 coins. And so if you wanted to, you can have a dropdown that could dynamically render out all the coins that they support. However, I wanted to keep the app simple, so I've just hard-coded a couple of different coins. You can obviously tweak this however you'd like, but I wanted to make sure we just kept it as simple as possible. And so I've hard-coded these 10 different coins. I think there's 10, maybe 8 to 10 coins. And the way that it works is if you select a coin that you're not actively tracking right now. So right now, it doesn't look like we have Ethereum on the list. So if I select Ethereum, it's going to add it to the list so we can see the price, and then we can click on it and see the detailed information. And so all it's really doing when you select a new cryptocurrency to add to the list is that it's going to our context and it's adding it to our watch list. And once it gets added to our watch list, the rest of our code should handle it. And so let's go ahead and create our AddCoin component if we haven't already done so. So I've already created this. And right now it's just an empty, plain old functional component that's rendering out a empty div. And we might as well render it out onto our coin summary page. So don't forget to import it as well. And so now if we do a save, nothing should change because right now our AddCoin is just nothing more than an empty div. And to actually implement this drop-down menu, we're going to be using Bootstrap. And so if you go to components and then drop down, you'll see that they have an example of how to do that. So we have to create a div, and hopefully you guys can read this. So we create a div with the class of dropdown. We then put in a button, and we have to provide all of these classes. And then we have another div, which is going to encompass the drop-down items, which is going to be our different cryptocurrencies. So it's pretty simple. And so let's get started on that. And the first thing I want to do is define an array that's going to hard code the different cryptocurrencies that we're going to support. And so I'm going to call this available coins. So these will be all of the coins that we are going to render out onto a list. And I'm just going to copy and paste it from my notes. And so go ahead and just pause the video or take a look at the completed code, and you can just copy it from there. All right. And so now for what we're rendering out onto the screen, the first thing that we need to do is give our div a class name. And we're going to give it a class of dropdown. And then within this div, the first item is going to be a button. And that's going to have a class of btn-primary. That's going to turn it blue. And then a class of dropdown-toggle. And we also have to give this a type equal to button. And our button is going to say add coin. Now the second div is going to contain the list of coins. So we'll do a div with a class of dropdown-menu, and we'll just leave it like that for now. And within this div, we're going to have to render out all of these coins as anchor tags. So we can see here in the example they gave us, within this div, each item is going to be an anchor tag with a dropdown-item class. And so since we have an array, we can iterate over that array or map that array. So we'll do available coins.map. And we're going to have access to the specific coin we're iterating over at that moment. And we're going to return a JSX expression, and it's going to be an anchor tag with a class of dropdown-item. And the link isn't going to go anywhere. And we're going to pass in the name of the coin, which is going to be accessible from EL. And that should be it. So let's hit save, and let's go back to our app, and let's take a look. Okay, so right now, we see our button. That's nice. When we click on it, nothing happens, but that's expected. We haven't implemented the logic for that. But the way that this button is going to work is to actually see the drop-down items. All we have to do is under this div right here that has a drop-down menu, all we have to do is just add a specific class of show, right? This comes from the Bootstrap library. So once you add a class of show to this div, you can see that this drop-down will start to appear. And right now it's hard-coded, so we can't get rid of it. And so all we have to do is just find a way to toggle this specific class, and we can implement that toggling functionality. And so the easiest way to do that, we're going to use our useState hook like we've done before. And this is just going to be a simple Boolean. And so we'll do a const, and I'm going to call this is active. So going to represent whether the drop-down menu is active or not. And then the function will be set is active. And this is going to default to a value of false because by default, our dropdown should not be open. And make sure to import useState as well. So I'm going to do useState and let VS Code import it in for me. And now we have to set an on-click event handler for this button so that when the button is clicked, we should toggle the state of our isActive object. And so that can be done just by calling our setIsActive function and just setting it to the opposite value of whatever isActive is at the moment. All right, so now if we select this, we should see that the current state changes. We don't see the drop-down menu, but that's to be expected. So let me open up the console real quick, and let's just make sure that the state is properly changing. We go to our AddCoin component. Right now, the state is true. We select this again. State moves to false. So that part is working so far. Now, the next thing we have to do is dynamically render out our classes for this div so that if isActive is set to true, we need to add in a show class. And so this is going to be fairly easy. We can just use a ternary operator and we'll say isActive. So if isActive is true, we're going to return a string of dropdown dash menu as well as a class of show. And if it's not true, then we're just going to return dropdown dash menu. All right. And now we click on this, we should see our list pop up. And if we click on this, it should close. Great. So we've got that done. Now let's actually work on making sure that when the user selects one of these coins, it gets added to our watch list. And to do that, we have to go back to our WatchList context. And we need to add a new function within this component. And I'm going to call this function AddCoin. So it's going to be responsible for handling the addition of a coin to our watch list. And the first thing that we have to do is we want to make sure that if we're already tracking Bitcoin, it's already in our watch list. If the user selects Bitcoin again, we don't want to add it a second time. So we need a quick check to make sure that the coin that's being added isn't already in the list. And that's pretty easy to do. We just need a simple if statement, and what we can say is watch list dot index of coin equals -1. Okay, so let me explain what this is doing. So watch list is just an array, right? It's nothing more than a simple array. And basically what we're going to do is we want to find what the index of a specific coin is. So if we typed in Bitcoin right now into this right here, it would give us an index of 0 because it's the first one. If we did if we pass in a value of Ripple, it would give us an index of 2. If we passed in Litecoin, it would give us an index of 3. However, if we pass in a coin that's not in our list, it's going to give us a -1. So that's how we're going to check to make sure that the coin isn't actively in our list, by just making sure that when we do an index of, we should get a -1, and that's going to confirm that this coin is not in our list and we should actually add it. And adding it to our list is going to be easy. We'll just do set watch list. And we're going to pass in our array. And remember, we want to pass in the watch list. So we're essentially making a copy of that array. And then we're going to pass in our new coin. And so now that we've got that function, we want to make sure that we pass it down so that anyone subscribing to our context can have access to that function. And now going back to our AddCoin, we want to make sure that we actually have access to that AddCoin method or function. And so we're going to have to use the use context hook. So we'll do const, and we're going to destructure out AddCoin because we don't really need anything else from there. And we'll do use context. Don't forget to import that. And we also need to import WatchList context. And just to make sure you guys are following, I imported both of those. Okay, so now we have access to the AddCoin function. We just got to figure out where and when we should actually run that function. And so basically, anytime a user clicks on one of these anchor tags, we should then call that function. So I'm going to create a new function. It's going to be called const handle click. And the coin is going to get passed in there. And we'll say add coin. And then we pass in that value of the coin. And also, we want to make sure that once a user actually clicks on one of these items, that we close out our drop-down menu. Actually, you know what? We'll leave that for now, and I want to make sure I actually show you guys why we want to do that. So we'll do. We want to go down to our anchor tag now and set an on-click event handler. I pass an arrow function, and we'll say handle click. And we want to make sure that we pass in the coin. So that's going to be accessible from the EL property. We could obviously rename that to coin to make it a little bit more readable, but I'll leave it as EL for now. So at this point, if I click this, we should see that it loads up. I don't think anything changed. Let's check that out. There we go. So you can see when I click on Tezos, I get this added. If I click on Cardano, it should get added as well. I guess that one's Cardano. But you can see that after we add a new coin, we want to make sure that this drop-down menu goes away. And so that's pretty easy to do. All we have to do is set is active to false. All right, so let's test that out. Let's add Tezos, and that's working. Great. And yep, so that's all we had to do to implement the AddCoin functionality. In the final video for this project, I'm going to show you guys how to implement local storage. And luckily, this is a very, very simple procedure. I'm going to show you guys this by just going into the developer console. And anytime you want to save data to the local storage of the web browser, all we have to do is let's just type in local storage. So that's usually the command that we want to use when we want to work with the storage, and then we can call a specific method on it. So there's several methods. We've got get item and set item. These are the two main things that we care about. So if we want to save data to the local storage, we'll call the set item function or method. And then we have to pass in a key, because the way that data gets stored in the browser or in local storage is that we can just pass in key value pairs and nothing else. That's all it can really handle. So we'll give it a key, and I'm going to say this is going to be, let's just say my data. And then we actually have to give it the data, and that's going to be, some other string. So I'll say like, this is my data, and then close that bracket, hit enter. And so this should have stored this key to this value. And so we can find out if we actually were successfully able to store that to our local storage by going into, I think is it memory application? Yeah, application. So go to the local storage tab and then go to your specific website. And so each website can store its own respective data. And I'm working on page localhost :3004. However, you might be on, :3000. And when we ultimately go to deploy our website, we're going to have a domain name. And so that domain name will get populated here. So let's select this. And you can see that we actually have two pieces of data. So we've got the my data, which I just stored. And then we've got the watch list. So I realized I did this on the tab where it's the completed project. So you're going to see that we're storing watch list within the local storage. So that's how you save data. Now to retrieve data, what we do is we do local storage and then .get item. And we'll get, let's see, my data. Did I capitalize it? I don't remember. Yep. And so now we were able to retrieve the value of my data, which was stored in local storage and printed out to the screen. So that's all we have to do. We just set item and get item. And so let's go ahead and implement this in our app. And so let's think about what data do we need to actually store. And I kind of already gave this away because we saw that already. But ultimately we have a list of coins that the user wants to watch. So we want to store that watch list. And if we go to our context, and this is probably the perfect place to implement this because the context is where we are defining that state for watch list, right? So watch list is going to have the list of coins the user is interested in. So we need to find a way to store watch list into local storage. And so we got to figure out how we're going to do that. And on top of that, we got to figure out when we want to do that. And so anytime the watch list changes, right? So anytime the user, either adds a new coin to the list or deletes a coin, we're going to update watch list. And it makes sense to update our local storage value whenever watch list changes, right? Because that's ultimately the values that we're going to be storing. So anytime a variable changes, and in this case, watch list, we want to basically send watch list to local storage, or at least update it. So if you think about this, I'm pretty sure you guys can already figure out how we're going to implement this. So if we ever need to define any kind of dependency where, if some variable or state changes, then we need to perform certain tasks, right? That's the perfect scenario for the use effect hook. And so let's define that again, use effect. We're going to pass in a function. And before we proceed any further, the way we're going to get this hook to run whenever watchlist changes is to add it to the dependency array. So I will put in watchlist, and that's it. So anytime this value changes, so anytime we add a new coin, delete a coin, whatever, we're going to run this use effect hook. And all we have to do here is just say local storage dot set item, right? And then all we have to do is let's define a key for our data. I think it just makes sense to call it watch list. And then here we're going to just pass in watch list. So we'll do watch list. And if I hit save, let's delete a few things and let's inspect and go to applications, session storage, localhost. I'm on localhost 3003. Wait, did I save this? Let me double check and make sure I saved it. Okay, I think I saved it. So now let's make sure this worked. And it looks like it did not work. So let's delete that. And nothing is happening. Oh, sorry, guys. I'm in session storage. So we want to go to local storage. All right. So we've got watchlist. It has just Bitcoin, which makes sense. And if we add a coin, let's add Ethereum. Okay. We've added Ethereum to our local storage. Let's add a couple more. All right. And so it looks like it's working. So let's refresh our page and see if it remembers this. So we have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then whatever these two are. So just try to remember what it looks like. You hit refresh. Okay, it looks like things have changed. So it did not load up the local storage. And that makes sense because we didn't tell it to, right? We set up the logic to save it to storage, but when the website loads the page, we needed to tell it to load up that data. And right now, instead of loading up that data, it just loads the default, which we pass into use state. So let's figure out how to get that data. And so I want to show you something real quick because when we store data into local storage, it's not storing it as JavaScript components. JavaScript objects, and it doesn't have that ability. Instead, all it can do is just store those key value pairs. And what's interesting is if I do a local storage dot get state or get item, sorry, and then I ask for watch list, you're going to see something unusual. What? What did I do? Oh, I misspelled it. Right? Look at how it's stored. It's not stored in an array. It's a big ass string where we're just, separating each item that was in the array with a comma. So we have to take that into consideration when we import this data into our application. So let's do a console.log. And then we'll just copy this and save that. And so here you can see it got, wait, wrong thing. Did it not? There we go. So it's just printing it out as a string. So what we need to do is we need to modify this. So we'll say we want to split this string. Right? This is a method that you can run on any string, and it's going to split your string into an array of different strings based off of some kind of match criteria. So I want to split it anytime I see a comma, right? So anytime we see a comma, we're going to split it into a new item in the array. So that's going to give us 4 different items within the array. And so now if I do a console.log, we now get an array of 4 items. And that's exactly what we need. All right, so we know how to handle getting the values back from the local storage and modifying it to put it back into a array. Now we have to figure out how to load it into use state when we load up the web page. And here's a handy dandy little trick. So right now this is getting passed into the array, but what we can do instead is I can say, instead of loading this, we're going to pass the OR function and say, copy this local storage, this line right here, I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to move it right here. And we'll hit save. It looks like we're getting a warning for the key prop for the AddCoin list. Who cares about that? And so let's test this out. So I'm going to add a coin. So we'll just add a whole bunch of coins. And let's double check that it's getting saved to storage. And it is. And now let's refresh the page. All right, so it remembered the extra coins that we added. So this is working. But if I'm not sure if I've ever covered this in a previous video or a previous project. But what this line is saying is we have use state, and then we're passing in two things that are separated by the two vertical brackets. So it's saying that, if local storage exists, we want to set it to this. If this item right here exists, then we want to set it to this. However, if it doesn't, then I want to set it to this essentially. And the reason that works is that we're just performing a logical OR. So when we perform an OR with something that has a value with another thing that has a value, we're going to return this value, and we can confirm that in the console. So let's say I want to do 4 or 3, right? You see, it returns that first one, right? And we'll do it again. I could even do it with a string. It doesn't really matter what kind of object. And then or 4, right? It returns that string. So it's always going to return the first item that we pass in if it's defined. However, if I pass in undefined, something that's undefined, which if we have no local storage, then it'll be set to undefined. And I pass an OR, and then I pass in a number, 4 gets returned. So that's all it's doing, right? If this exists, we're going to pass that in. If it doesn't exist and it's undefined, then we're going to pass this in. And so that's it, guys. We have completed our app. We've implemented a ton of different things, and we've got a chance to learn about a lot of different things, including like local storage, how to basically send a bunch of API requests concurrently. And there's a few other things that we've covered that we never gotten a chance to cover before. So this is, as I said, was definitely one of my favorite projects, but I'm a little gassed out from having to talk for the past 5-6 hours for recording this video. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed this project. We've still got plenty more to come. So hopefully you guys are ready.